So these are the topics that we're going to be dealing with here: delivery, handling interruptions, effective listening, maintaining interest, orienting learners, and handling questions. First of all, we're talking about oral presentations. We're talking about the use of our voice. Okay? And the first one of those, projecting your voice, has to do with the fact that projecting your voice and yelling are two completely different things. And most of us don't remember that. You can always tell when somebody has been teaching elementary school for about 5 years. You should tape them at the beginning and tape them at the end of the 5th year. It's not the same voice. And for the most part, that happens because a lot of us tend to speak with our from here, from our throat. And that makes your voice very hoarse after a while. Okay? Most people who train their voices, of course, speak from their diaphragm, which is I don't know if you've noticed actors, for example, on a stage, can always see their stomachs moving, because every time they do something that requires raising their voice, they pop it up from down here instead of from here. That's one thing to remember. Besides, yelling irritates people. And if you irritate people, there goes your learning also. It's another block for learning, to learning. People in the last row should be able to hear. That should be your parameter for that, your criterion. The people in the last row can hear. That should be good enough for you. We're talking about projecting our voice as opposed to changing our tone, which are two completely different things. We're talking about varying your tone of voice and also projecting no matter what your level, your voice level is. Now, changing your tone of voice can be very effective when you're trying to present contrasts between what comes in a sequence or what is not as important as something else that may be very important. You see the difference between the two? It's used too dramatically, but it points out to something. You don't need to keep the same tone of voice all the time for something. Don't keep it too low and don't keep it too high all the time. You keep it too high, after a while, people get used to hearing the same voice. They're not listening to you at all. And the interest is completely gone. And you can manipulate that attention, manipulate in a good sense, manipulate that attention with how you use your voice. First of all, project your voice. Second, enunciate correctly. And try to pronounce things clearly so that people can understand what you're saying. That doesn't mean you have to overdo things as if you were on the stage at a theater. But it means that you should pronounce clearly what you're saying so that everybody can understand what you're saying. Choose your words according to your audience. Do you have any ideas on that? What that could mean?
Don't speak up to or don't speak down to.
I'm sorry?
Don't speak up to or don't speak down to.
Correct, yeah. And how do you do that?
Well, you would be speaking down to if you used larger words and content and the audience is able to accept.
Absolutely. One of the things that, or one of the ideas that fall from that is the fact that when you use words that are too big for your audience, you shut people off because all you're doing is impressing them with your knowledge, but they're not learning anything. Okay? And some other times, especially in our context, we have these very specialized terms that seem very specialized to us because we've been around them for a long time. And we keep using them, and then all of a sudden we go into another environment and use that word with a particular meaning without any concern for whether or not it means the same thing in that person's own repertoire of ideas or concepts. Okay? Do you know what multitasking is? The environment I come from is from Cray XMP. Multitasking on a Cray XMP is similar to that, but it's certainly not that. So if I would have stood up here and talked to you about multitasking for half an hour, and you would have had the same concept that you thought you were talking about, we would have been talking about maybe 60% of the same thing. So if you if you analyze it on its own, it seems very clear. Multitasking, many tasks, supposedly at once, right? It's not exactly the same thing. And I would have been talking about it for 2 years. Well, by that time you would have caught on, I'm sure. But we could have been talking for a while, and you would have been wondering, wait a minute, what's he talking about now? Right? It's not exactly the same thing. And yet it's a very simple word with supposedly a very simple, straightforward meaning. How about acronyms? Of course, we don't use any track of those. And a lot of times, I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of people do enjoy using acronyms and just throwing them on and on and on and piling them until you were lost with the first one. By the time the fifth one comes along, you're absolutely lost. Well, think of us as people standing up in front of other people, and all we're doing is throwing out acronyms and so-called specialized words that may not be that specialized after all. We've lost them. Okay. So, yes, choosing your words according to your audience means not just that you're not going to talk down to them or too high to them. It also has to do with clarity. Clarity. Otherwise, all you get is confusion, and you're lost. And what I always suggest is that whenever you find people who do that to you, raise your hand and ask them what they mean exactly after they have used the word.